SBC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily Podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
Startups have always been an integral part of the online gambling space. Some of the largest companies in the sector started out as a small idea and from humble roots. Nobody arguably is more in tune with what is going on in the world of gaming startups than Betting Startups podcast host Jesse Learmonth. On today's episode of iGaming Daily, we'll survey the startup landscape and talk about what to expect from next week's First Pitch Competition at SBC Summit in Lisbon. iGaming Daily is brought to you by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. We can still get you that first free month if you go to optimove.com/SBC or just click that link in the description below. I am Jessica Welman, editor of SBC Americas, and I am joined, as I said, by Jesse Learmonth, who you are our MC for all of the first pitches, which we thoroughly appreciate. So for those who don't know why you're so tied into the startup space, do you want to just kind of give our audience a little bit of background as to how you ended up being the guy who covers and is in the know of what's going on in that particular area?
Yeah, 100%, Jessica. First of all, thank you for having me. Great to finally be on your show with you, and really excited to see you and the SBC team next week in Lisbon. I got a head start on my trip to Portugal, so I won't have jet lag, which I'm happy about. I won't have any excuses to be tired next week. Look, I'll give a quick synopsis here as to sort of how I found myself spending as much time as I do talking to early stage and growth stage companies within our space. I guess the first jumping off point would be I did once upon a time have a startup myself within the real money gaming industry. Back in 2010, which feels like prehistoric times, I started a company doing a lot of what we now call data analytics and a lot of stats driven tools for bettors. At that time, if you can kind of rewind in your mind a little bit, you know, the movie Moneyball had just come out. People were very enamored with this concept of sabermetrics and data analysis. And at that time, there really wasn't anything for sports bettors or punters to crunch numbers easily. So my team and I set out to build some tools at that time. And that was our foray into the industry. And I've been hanging around ever since. So I do have that firsthand experience on the startup roller coaster and from a founder perspective. My startup got acquired by Pinnacle Sports in 2015, which sort of set the trajectory for the next 6 years for me in the industry, working for one of the most prominent bookmakers in the world. And that, amongst other things, included a relocation to the island of Curacao, which was a great time in my life, and many lifelong friends from that chapter. And part of my remit at Pinnacle, in my role there as director of product management, was kind of being the gatekeeper for a lot of new suppliers that wanted to pitch their wares to Pinnacle. So I was already out at all of the industry conferences every year, hearing pitches from new suppliers, new vendors, and within that, a lot of new startups as well. And, part of my role was to kind of just talk to them all. And I really enjoyed that. I really have always had an affinity for startup culture and going from 0 to 1. And back in the day when I started my company in the town on the west coast of Canada where I live, I started a local meetup group for local entrepreneurs and founders and really kind of cut my teeth, I would say, on being sort of the person there, galvanizing a community of people around early stage tech companies. And, fast forward 6 years after my time with Pinnacle was up, I really didn't know what I wanted to do next. So, I was kind of sitting around. I'm like, you know what? My role there is done, but I kind of want to still keep talking to founders of early stage companies in the space because obviously, in 2020, 2021, in the first couple of years post PASPA, there was the gold rush, right? Everybody was coming into the space with their big ideas and there was so much happening and there still is, of course. But I just said, you know what, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to just talk to one startup a week and just kind of see where this goes. And almost 3 years later now, and 130 something episodes later, still no shortage of startups trying to get on the podcast, still no shortage of people for me to talk to. And just through the sheer consistency of me putting out an episode every week, I've really, I would say, accidentally positioned myself as being one of the people really in the know with early stage companies in the space. So, it's a quick arc to my story, Jessica. Happy to sort of pull on any threads there, but that's kind of the road that got me here. I'm
curious. So I am not a founder, but I was kind of ground floor of the group that was acquired and became Catena in North America, or now basically all of Catena. And I just remember the vibe when there was 10 of us, 12 of us. And there's it's great to work for big companies too, but do you think some of the desire to talk to these guys is because that part of the process, there's always just so much energy and potential, and it's just a different vibe than a lot of other companies?
I mean, I think you just hit the nail on the head, right? Like at that stage, at the earliest stages, everything is nothing but potential, right? And that's the exciting part. You have nothing but the future to be hopeful about. And as your company starts to reach scale, which of course is a great place to be, that's where we all aspire to be, but you lose a little bit of that enthusiasm, let's call it. Things start to get real. You start to need to have processes and infrastructure and some of these sort of more corporate-y things that somewhat detracts from that, the excitement of those earliest days. And a lot of the folks I talked to on the podcast that have reached scale, I did an interview a few weeks ago with the co-founders of PrizePicks. That's a good example. And, they were lamenting about the early days, like you just talked about, back when it was like 10 or 12 of them, and they were sort of elbow to elbow in one room. And of course, now they're a juggernaut. I don't need to explain how successful they've been, but there really is is a special time in any company's life cycle at those earliest days. And I think once companies, if they're lucky enough to sort of reach that critical mass and reach scale, they really do look back longingly on those earliest days, even though, times are tough. There's never money in the bank. You're never quite sure where your next dollar is coming from. Like, it goes both ways, but there is a real romanticism about those earliest possible days.
It's a very cool spot for them. It's, we all look at the success, it's PrizePicks is a great example in the US, DraftKings and FanDuel startups at the end of the day too. So it's great that you can scale like that, but that's kind of what I love about being at the First Pitch competition, which you are a great host of. I've been to the US one and the Canada one. I plan to hopefully find time to be there on Tuesday, as anybody listening should. But for those, who would you say benefits the most from attending and watching along with the First Pitch contest?
Yeah, great question. I mean, beyond the obvious answer of the finalists themselves, who have a fantastic platform that SBC provides them to really, get their message out there, get discovered, get that visibility, which is so crucial at the earliest stages, and really helping to position them as credible companies within the industry that are innovating and disrupting. Beyond that, a lot of the folks that join the audience of the live event are, I would say, everything from, obviously, investors are very interested in looking at the next big thing. We get a lot of folks that represent operators that are in the room looking for potential new partners or suppliers, or strategic partners at that level. We get a lot of other influential stakeholders that, again, are really just trying to see who are the next big disruptors coming into the space. And really, when I'm up on stage or looking out at the audience in the room there and looking at the folks that are in the room, it really is a well-represented room of very influential senior industry stakeholders in there. It really does draw a crowd. I mean, I know you were in New Jersey in May at the event there, and that one was literally standing room only. There was a queue to get in the room for that one. We actually ran out of space. So that's a real testament to just how much, I would say, enthusiasm there is for folks that are looking to kind of bear witness to the live pitch event. And also, I should say as well, right, you think a little bit about like Shark Tank or that type of format, and people just are generally interested in seeing companies do a live pitch, and sort of the excitement and anticipation around what will the judges ask them, what will the feedback be, will anybody bomb? Like there's always sort of like that intrigue as well, which draws part of the audience into. So you get a wide cross section of people in the room there, but there is a very meaningful cohort of those that are senior decision makers. Absolutely.
Yeah, you hit on something I think is super cool about it, which is there is a panel of judges that are just elite people. We've got Paris Smith from Pinnacle, amongst others, on the panel. So hearing the kinds of things that they think to ask people and getting a little kind of glimpse into their mindset of what they're looking at is another really cool piece of this.
I'm always so amazed at the caliber of judges. But to your point, Jessica, the questions that they think to ask in real time, I mean, are just a real testament to the level of expertise and experience that the judges have. And, I would not want the pressure of sitting there on the judging panel, having to think about how to critique the pitches that we just heard, because the pitches are very well crafted and very well delivered, and obviously is a product of many reps of practice that the founders are putting into it. And the questions they get, they do get put on the spot. They're very smart questions. And again, I'm reflecting back on the New Jersey installment a few months ago. I was just amazed by the level of thoughtfulness from the judges. And that really also is, frankly, a big value add for the founders up on stage to get perhaps a level of questioning they wouldn't otherwise get, which forces them to really think critically about, some of the fundamental aspects of their businesses.
The format, you said, it's kind of like Shark Tank. They've got 3 minutes. They can have visual aids. It reminds me, I did competitive public speaking in high school. And so this is I like going to First Pitch too, because it's the closest I get to like reliving that heyday for myself. 3 minutes is such a small amount of time. How do, as someone who's done pitches, how do you get down into 3 minutes what you need to say? Like, how much do you practice? Is everyone scripted to the word? Are people willing to go off the cuff? What works and what doesn't?
Yeah, great question. And 3 minutes is 180 seconds. And when you're up on stage where there's a countdown timer right in front of you, basically staring back at you, literally ticking down those 180 seconds, and it goes quick. The room's often warm, the lights are bright. And you really need, in my opinion, and I would say the winners of previous installments of First Pitch and the more, successfully delivered pitches I've seen really come down to people almost developing a muscle memory around the pitch and the presentation, right? You need to expect something is going to go wrong. There might be a technical issue. You might get thrown off. The mic might stop working for a minute. And the moment you get thrown off, you need to be able to immediately pick up where you left off. And, some of the folks that have won previous installments, I've asked them, like, what have you guys done to kind of get, to get the W? And they said, literally stood in front of a mirror and rehearsed it 100 times until I got this thing down word for word in 180 seconds. And that really is the level of preparation that needs to go into this if you're serious about winning. And of course, all companies are serious about winning. It's a fantastic prize package. I don't know why you wouldn't want to win. But that is the level of preparedness that one needs to bring into it. And it doesn't leave a lot of margin for error. It doesn't leave a lot of room to go off script. I have seen some startups over my time hosting the First Pitch event where they tried to ad-lib it and it goes horribly wrong. They fall off script. And by the time they get back onto their script, they're down to like the last 30 seconds. And me being the affable Canadian I generally am, have to play the bad cop there and hook them off stage. I feel like it's like the end of the Oscars, the sort of
playing them off. Yeah,
it is what it is. But you really do have to get every word developed in the memory bank, and every second counts. It's so cliche, but it's just so true, because 3 minutes, man, it goes quickly.
What's impressive too is once you rehearse something that much, it can sound rote. It can sound like you don't have energy in it. And so you have to have it down pat, but also make it sound like you're just kind of talking off the cuff. But I think these guys tend to be so passionate about their project that part might not be as hard as it seems.
Yeah, well, the passion certainly helps. I would say the other thing too that I often, people sometimes ask me for feedback, whatever my feedback is worth. But, some of the, again, better pitches I've seen really tend to include a little bit of narrative or storytelling as opposed to pure facts and figures and like numbers and metrics and all that stuff, which is important and obviously tells a story of success. But you need to include a little bit of like storytelling in there too, right? At the end of the day, the judges are humans. And as humans, our brains are wired to really respond well to narratives and stories and intrigue and all of this. So to your point, yeah, it can come across as a little bit overly rehearsed. But I think one way to overcome it is by injecting a little bit of storytelling, which gives you a bit of room for, injecting your own personality, some of that passion you talked about. That really is, I think, a key differentiator for, again, the more successful pitches that I've seen over my time hosting First Pitch.
How important is the deck, the visuals and that sort of thing to, put together a really winning pitch?
Yeah, I mean, it helps. Really, a trap I would sort of hazard folks to try and not fall into is to sort of use the deck as the talking points. And again, if you can visualize you as a founder up on stage looking out at the audience, there's a screen behind you that you can't see because you're facing the audience. And oftentimes the founders are turning around, looking at the deck on the screen behind them, facing away from the audience, which doesn't lend itself well to really, again, engaging with the judges, engaging with the audience, and really having your story resonate with them. So the deck is really an aid, right? It's a tool. It's supposed to reinforce the words that you're saying, as opposed to being the script you're reading off up there on stage. And again, that is a big differentiator and something that has been, a hallmark of the winners of the past installments of First Pitch.
I'm curious do you follow the pitch guy or the pitch deck guy newsletter where they send out kind of what winning and successful decks look like? This is a weird newsletter I have fallen down the rabbit hole of, just because I'm always curious, like, sometimes we talked about this on the pod before, Better and Joey Levy. You see how much money that group has raised. I was like, that's got to be a hell of a deck and a hell of a pitch. And you just want to see it. Do you take time to just really dive into those decks and stuff of all the startups that are in the space still?
I mean, number one, I should probably subscribe to that newsletter. I haven't seen it. It sounds like a rabbit hole, as you say.
It's like Coke and everything. It's not just gaming, but yeah, it's a fun one.
That's cool. So, I mean, yeah, I get a lot of decks hitting my inbox in different contexts, right? Part of, as a bit of a side note and an interesting anecdote, perhaps, with the position I suppose I've carved out for myself with the Betting Startups platform, organically, what's kind of happened is I get a lot of founders approaching me saying, hey, here's us, here we are. I've attached our deck to kind of introduce ourselves. We're looking for capital. Can you help us, find some investors? And on the other side, I do get, a certain cohort of investors saying, hey, Jesse, what are some interesting companies, deals, opportunities coming in? I'm kind of finding myself in the middle of all of this, which is again, maybe a story for another day. But to your question, I do see a lot of decks coming through. Coming back to what I said a minute ago about the storytelling aspect, some of the ones that really resonate with me the most are the ones that really have a very interesting sort of arc to the narrative, more so than again, just problem, solution, TAM, all of this fundamental stuff you would expect to see in any deck. Yeah, that stuff's all important, but the ones that really hook me in the first minute, which is what keeps me clicking through to the end of the deck, are the ones that really, put a bit of bait out there to intrigue me. And the ones that I think, probably I haven't seen the Better deck, obviously, but I have to reasonably assume, and having heard Joey speak a lot about the journey with Better and formerly with Simplebet, and the success he's had on the, raising capital side of things, I have to assume there's a very interesting sort of storytelling aspect to what they've done, which has led to some of the success. And to me, that is such a critical ingredient is just getting past the sheer bullet points on the deck. That part is so dry after a while. And if you look at enough decks, I mean, you start to get almost blindness to it. You don't really absorb what you're reading is what it comes down to. So it needs to be something that really hooks the reader in the first minute to kind of compel them to keep reading all the way to the end.
All right. I'm curious, how often have you predicted who the winner is going to be and been right for our first pitch competitions? Because the competition's tight in this sometimes. And I know for me, at least as an audience member, I've been wrong before that I was like, well, but I think there's also a difference between someone who's a very compelling presenter versus not necessarily having the most compelling product.
Yeah, I think that last point is the one to make, and maybe a bit of my defense as to why I haven't gone 100% with my own predictions. So, I mean, when I'm standing up there next to the stage, listening to the 5 presentations, obviously, as everybody in the audience is, you're sort of doing your own ranking. And I'd say my hit rate's about 50%. And to your point, some of the best pitches I've seen haven't necessarily been the best business opportunities that the judges have identified, right? So, I've been surprised a few times. I'm not going to lie about that, but it also makes me relieved as to why I'm not a judge, right? I'm definitely up there, I think, ranking what I deem to be the best delivery of a presentation and pitch, not necessarily indexing it on what, might have the greatest likelihood of commercial success or longevity or scale within the industry. So again, I don't envy the judges. It's very difficult because by the time you get down to the 5 companies that are chosen as finalists, I mean, they're typically competing against a field of, I don't know what the numbers are these days. Sue told me, I think for this one, it was around 40 submissions that SBC received. So right away, you're getting down to almost the top 10% of submissions up there on stage, which already is 5 very strong companies, and narrowing it down to 1 from there. Again, I don't envy the role of the judges, but again, the judges are eminently qualified to do that. And that's why we have such a fantastic lineup of them for every installment of First Pitch.
Yeah. So to quickly just run down the 5 companies that we will see in Lisbon next week, it is Match Hype, Random State, SavageTech, StatX Sports, and XGENIA. I will say, looking at these, I think this is the most B2B SaaS focused group of 5 we've had. Agree or disagree on that one? It seems like we've had a lot of more consumer facing marketing focused companies, at least in the US. And this group, it's a really different set of what they're bringing to the table.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. And actually, you just hit a point that I was going to mention, which is, the fact that for this installment of First Pitch, which of course is in Lisbon. I think 4 out of the 5 finalists are European based. We have one that is coming over from the US, which is Sean at StatX Sports. But I guess what I'm observing is, to your point, like on the US side, in the last 3 versions of First Pitch in New Jersey have been very consumer centric with a lot of the products. And I don't know if that's a reflection of the state of maturation of the US market vis-a-vis the European side, which of course, generally speaking, is far more mature. And I think the entrepreneurs that are entering the space are identifying opportunities that are a reflection of the maturity of the space, that are looking for more, I would say, narrow parts of the stack to infiltrate, as opposed to being, the next DFS operator. It's a bad example, but like, you know what I mean? There's a bit of, I would almost say, and I might get in trouble for saying this, I would almost argue there's a bit more sophistication in the caliber of companies that are in this installment of First Pitch, because they are really thinking critically about some very narrow parts of the industry, but also ones that are ripe to be attacked. So I love it. I think, and I'm not being facetious in saying this because we're trying to sort of hype it up a little bit, this is definitely the most competitive field I've seen of my times hosting First Pitch. And, there's a couple in there that, as you would expect, are very heavily leaning on AI. Actually, probably 3 of the 5 are. And, the technology that's now being developed is extremely robust. And this stuff probably has a lot of use case, if I'm being honest, for other industries or verticals beyond just iGaming in some instances, right? So this is very sophisticated stuff. Huge opportunities are attacking here. And each of these companies stands a very legitimate chance of winning next week. So yeah, it's a fantastic field.
Yeah, I was very impressed looking at the field. Not to belittle any of the other first pitches that we've had, but like you said, you can tell that these are people that are thinking really in depth about where people need assistance, be like in the tech stacks in particular. So I am very excited to see you. Just a reminder, everyone, First Pitch will be on Tuesday this year at SBC Summit Lisbon. So be sure to find some time and check it out. Jesse, thanks so much for joining us, and I can't wait to see you across the pond next week.
All right, safe travels over, Jessica. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily Podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network, or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.